Welcome to Book Talk. This is the first video of my new segment called Behind the Author. I'm going to be talking about the so-called friendly feud between Stephen King and James Patterson. This isn't really the type of thing I planned on talking about per se, but after doing some research on James Patterson for my last book review, I came across a few things that have completely changed my perspective of him. We'll get to that later, but first, I want to give you some background. So, as far as I can tell, the feud between these famous authors started back in 2007 when Stephen King, after accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Booksellers Association, criticized James Patterson's work. He said, "I don't like him. I don't respect his books because everyone is the same," implying that Patterson's books are formulaic. I haven't personally read any of his books other than the one Bookshot, but I do know that a lot of crime novels, especially in a series, have much of the same outline with just different people, settings, MOs, etc. And on a Reddit thread titled, "Has James Patterson's writing become formulaic and mass-produced?" many of the commenters who've actually read his books believe that he has always been and always will be mass-market grocery store tier. Patterson responded to King's remark in a review of 1408 posted on his website. If you aren't familiar with 1408, it's a movie based on a short story of the same name by Stephen King. If you haven't seen it and are a fan of horror movies, then I strongly recommend you watch it. It was amazing. Anyway, recently Stephen King commented that he doesn't have any respect for me. Doesn't make too much sense. I'm a good dad, a nice husband. My only crime is I've sold millions of books. As far as 1408 goes, what can I say? I liked it. The first third is especially fine. I'm a John Cusack fan, and, in terms of the books anyway, a Stephen King fan too. So this doesn't make much sense to me. King never mentions anything about Patterson's personal life. He simply meant he doesn't respect Patterson as a writer. Though he doesn't explicitly say that, you can inference it from the fact that he doesn't respect his books. It also seems a bit odd that this is the way he chose to respond on a movie review of a Stephen King short story. It also seems a bit braggy, almost like he's trying to say King is jealous of him. To me, it almost comes across as a thinly veiled slam, but I'm not unbiased at this point, so you'll have to draw your own conclusions. Then, in a 2009 interview with USA Weekend, King said Patterson was a terrible writer, but he's very successful. When asked about this comment in a 2016 interview with Associated Press, Patterson shrugged off the remark as hyperbole, which makes me think he doesn't know what that word means.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Hyperbole is an exaggeration. Saying someone's a terrible writer but a successful one is stating a fact and an opinion. James Patterson seemed to be handling this situation with grace. In a 2012 interview with the Wall Street Journal, Patterson said that he was a regular reader of King's books and that he's taken shots at me for years, it's fine, but my approach is to do the opposite with him, to heap praise. But then he did something that completely undermined his high road stance. In 2016, Patterson came up with the idea of bookshots, and in September of that year, he announced that one of these stories was called The Murder of Stephen King. Less than 2 weeks after the announcement, Patterson pulled the novella from publication. He said that after the book's announcement, he had been made aware that fans of Stephen King have disrupted the King household in the past. He clarified that The Murder of Stephen King was a positive portrayal of a fictional character, and, spoiler alert, the main character is not actually murdered. Nevertheless, I do not want to cause Stephen King or his family any discomfort. So the title is essentially real-life clickbait. I mean, I'm glad Stephen King didn't get murdered in the book, but why the hell would you name it The Murder of Stephen King? It was obviously for shock value. I did find a plot summary on Wikipedia that gives a little more insight into the book. A violent stalker reenacts horrific events from Stephen King's stories, with the ultimate target being King himself. The stalker intends to usurp King's status as a best-selling horror writer, with plans to write a tell-all book from his prison cell and be crowned the new king of horror. And get this, there's a detective in the novella who helps save Stephen King from the stalker, and his name is James Patterson. James Patterson. I can't be the only one to think this isn't a coincidence. Patterson claims that this book was meant to pay homage to King by praising his previous work, but honestly it seems like some weird fan fiction and a desperate cry for attention. And it doesn't end there. Patterson went on to talk about the murder of Stephen King in his 2022 autobiography and changes his tune. He now says that the book had been intended as a little good-natured ribbing of King, calling it a cool story with Stephen King as the damn hero. He goes on to say that when the publisher informed King of the manuscript, his representatives told them that his wife, Tabitha King, had previously been threatened by an intruder during a home invasion. Patterson wrote, "I didn't know that, and I got the point. But shouldn't that mean that maybe Stephen King should stop writing his own scary stories, if they were generally putting his family members in danger? I'm just saying." I read that and thought it was just disgusting. There's a difference between being a successful horror author who writes about fictional characters and writing a book about a real person being stalked by someone whose ultimate goal is murdering him. It's disrespectful, and then to be so bitter about it that you turn around and say, "Oh, well, maybe he should stop writing." Just say you're sorry and move on. Like, you're too old to be doing this. Especially since I haven't found any evidence that Stephen King said anything bad about James Patterson since 2009. It's almost like he stopped caring about this so-called feud, so Patterson wrote a book to get his attention. If that wasn't enough to change my opinion of James Patterson, finding out that he doesn't write most of his books and hasn't for a long time was the nail in the coffin. Apparently he's been very open about having ghostwriters, but I didn't know and I was just floored. You can't really call them ghostwriters either because he credits them as co-authors. So at least his book shots make a little more sense, because how do you co-write a book that isn't even 150 pages long? Patterson typically writes a summary and outline of the book. His co-author writes a first draft, then he provides feedback. He claims that when he writes the outline for a novel, the success rate of the resulting book is about 100%, but drops to about 50 to 60% when a co-author produces the book's outline. I don't believe a word of that, but I guess he gets more money as a co-author than just selling the idea to someone, and it keeps his name in the limelight. So, after finding that out, I've been assuming that every book he's ever co-written was done by the other person, just knowing what I know now. It might not be true, but if it is, he started doing this back in 1996, so most of his fame isn't deserved in my opinion, and there's people on Reddit who agree with me. On a thread from August 2024 called "King and Patterson Beef," the writer says, "I was just listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, and they had James Patterson as a guest. The host brought up that King and Patterson supposedly have beef, and Patterson said that King has a problem, not him. Then Patterson made fun of the cover of Holly. Anyone know why they don't like each other? Here are some of the responses. Patterson writes outlines and has ghostwriters finish the manuscript. King writes his own books. I bet it's that. That is it. Patterson is basically a shill. It might have something to do with the fact that King writes his own books. King is a real author. Patterson is a hack who has other people write his books for him. The former makes the latter nervous. King writes very different books in the same genre, or even in different genres. He also puts out maybe 2 books a year in a good year. Patterson writes formulaic thrillers and also turns out multiple books a year. King has been vocal about the factory aspect of Patterson's work and is putting his name on books others did the actual writing for. King is not above liking a formulaic book if the writing is good. Patterson just doesn't have the prose chops. Patterson is a joke. His books blow. His ghostwriter's books blow. It's basically assembly line literature, and King probably has a problem with it. So do I. I despise Patterson. He isn't an artist. He doesn't create. He's a brand. I think Patterson is probably jealous that many of Stephen King's books and movies have entered the cultural zeitgeist, and his have not. Patterson's books aren't as good as Stephen's, to be honest. If I'm holding a Patterson novel, I'm in an airport and I couldn't find something more interesting. Plus, there's been rumors about Patterson buying his way onto bestseller lists, which King wouldn't have to do. The common consensus is that James Patterson sucks. I haven't seen a single comment in his defense. The only thing that came close was literally 2 people saying they liked his stuff from the 70s and 80s, but not so much after that. So I almost do believe that he buys his way onto bestseller lists. Unless most of his fans are too old to know what Reddit is, it's possible. The last comment I'm going to show from this thread is this. I have a friend who is one of Patterson's ghostwriters. The pro is that it pays decently. Other than that, Patterson is a dick who actively makes good writing worse. If the writer dares to stray from the outline, it gets cut. You have some really good writers dumbing down their work to sound like Patterson wrote it, which pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Obviously, you can never prove someone's identity on Reddit, but I believe it. The more research I did on James Patterson, the more I'm seeing he's a bit of a narcissist. But like I said before, I'm not unbiased in this. I'm a huge fan of Stephen King, and I only read one crappy novella by one of James Patterson's ghostwriters, so you'll have to let me know what you think. Am I being too hard on James Patterson, or do you agree with me and every commenter on Reddit? Do you like Patterson's books, or do you prefer Stephen King? More importantly, did you like this video? I had fun making it and have plans for future Behind the Author videos if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for my next book review on a book dubbed The Greatest Spy Story Ever. Does it live up to expectations? You'll find out next time on Book Talk.